Thank you, Sensei. Why don't we begin with Gasho? Please join me in Gasho. Namandabutsu, 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 namandabutsu. Great. Well, thank you very much to the Midwest Buddhist Temple Sangha, to Reverend Todd, and to Reverend Ron for your kind invitation to join you for this most significant of our Jodo Shinshu Buddhist services, our Hoonko service. I'm particularly grateful to the Midwest Buddhist Temple for your many years of support for me on my ministerial journey. When I was first starting out as a ministerial student, of course, I grew up in Minnesota. I have many connections to the Chicago and Chicago area, and visiting friends. As warm welcome from many of your sangha members there. Carl Ichikawa, I remember taking me out for lunch one day early on. Reverend Siever also very kind to me, and truly grateful to the Midwest Buddhist Temple for providing me support in the Kono Scholarship when I was a ministerial student. And it's many ways thanks to your Sangha's generosity and support that I'm able to be here today and having this Dharma journey, which I've enjoyed so much. So I want to begin my Dharma talk today with some words from Shinran Shonin, who we remember today on this occasion of his memorial for Hoonko Service. These are words from one of his letters, and I find that they are particularly meaningful for us at this present moment of our lives as we come into the new year and live in a time of great change and transformation. So I invite you to join me in Gasho as we reflect upon these words of Shinran Shonin. There was a time for each of you when you knew nothing of Amida's vow and did not say the name of Amida Buddha. But now, guided by the compassionate means of Shakyamuni and Amida, you have begun to hear the vow. Formerly you were drunk with the wine of ignorance and had a liking only for the three poisons of greed, anger, and folly. But since you have begun to hear the Buddha's vow, you have gradually awakened from the drunkenness of ignorance, gradually rejected the three poisons, and come to prefer at all times the medicine of Amida Buddha. Namandabutsu. So these words from Shinran Shonin form the basis of one of kind of the basic understandings of how we approach the Dharma from the Jodo Shinshu tradition. We have a unique expression. We often talk about savoring the Nembutsu, savoring the flavor of the Dharma. And this expresses an appreciation that we can all approach the Dharma in our own way, from our own perspective, just as we have different tastes and different flavors that we like to eat, and that we can appreciate the flavors of different foods in different ways. The Dharma, which nourishes our hearts and minds, can sustain us in many different ways from many different perspectives. So these words Shinran Shonin describes talk about a shift in our way of really savoring our lives, savoring the experience of our lives. As we go through life, our way of appreciating flavors kind of changes and evolves over time. Flavors that we think were delicious as a kid, as an adult, if we have those, we might think that that's way too sweet, that's way too salty as our tastes mature. I was recently back in Japan visiting my wife's family around the end of the year. Of course, I was back in San Mateo for New Year's, but we were back in Japan for Christmas time. And Christmas time in Japan is interesting because there are customs that people think we do in America that are very just specifically kind of Japanese. And one of those is the Japanese Christmas cake, which is different from a kind of our holiday fruit cake that we have here in the US, but it's a kind of a white creamy cake, usually with strawberries, blueberries, fruit. It's kind of like a vanilla cake, lots of sort of vanilla frosting. And I remember the first time I had that in Japan, and someone served it to me I thought, oh, here, this is your first time being away from America at Christmas. I know you'll want to feel back at home. Here's some Christmas cake. And so I thought, okay. And I had a bite of it and I thought, this is nice, but honestly, it's not sweet enough. It's not sweet enough. My idea of cake is like kind of the grocery store sheet cake, with the frosting, the icing that's, about half of the cake is just a big chunk of really sweet, sweet, sugary icing. And for the longest time when I was in Japan, I thought, the Japanese, cakes and things is just not sweet enough. It doesn't have that sweetness that I'm used to. But I lived in Japan for a long time. I lived in Japan altogether for about 6 years continuously, from 2004 to 2010. And by the end of that time, I had come to really appreciate the flavors of these Japanese cakes and Japanese sweets, because I came to realize that you don't just taste the sugar. You also taste the cream. You can taste the flour and the bread, the flavors of the fruit. So the sweetness isn't overpowering everything else. And then at one point, going back home to Minnesota, going to typical kind of Midwest family reunion, and somebody's birthday, I had a big birthday cake, and I remember getting a piece. Oh, I've been waiting to eat this cake for so long, and finally having a bite. And it was like, oh, that is so sweet. The sweetness is overpowering, and I realized that my way of appreciating the flavor had changed and shifted, and that I had come to more wholly appreciate this more subtle flavors, where I could appreciate all of the different flavors that were there. Shinran Shonin talks about how our journey in the Nembutsu is similar to this, the way our minds change. We begin, in many cases, our journey, from a place maybe where we're dealing with some anger. Maybe we feel like we just can't get what we want, feelings of dissatisfaction, longing for things. We may feel that we're lost in life. We don't know our direction. And so we're seeking and we find the Dharma, and our minds change from a point at which we only know how to get mad about things that don't like us. We only know how to seek peace of mind through chasing after the things we want. We're drifting aimlessly and don't even realize we're lost. And then when we encounter the Dharma, our minds shift and we come to appreciate a new way of savoring life, the way that Shinran Shonin describes as to always prefer the flavor, the medicine of the primal vow of the Buddha. And so on this occasion of Hoonko, I wanted to share some of my appreciations of Shinran Shonin's life and teachings, and particular ways in which his way of living, I think we can savor and appreciate in our own lives at this moment, in our lives, in our country, in our society, where there's so much going on. There's here out on the West Coast, terrible fires burning down in Los Angeles. Our hearts go out to those affected by all of that destruction. Tomorrow's a big day, inauguration, another change in our cycle of democratic political leadership and so forth. And so there's a lot on our minds. And we can look to Shinran Shonin, I think, in his life for guidance in this moment. Shinran Shonin, as many of you may be aware, he was born just outside Kyoto in a place called Hino. He, at a very young age, at the age of 9, embraced the monastic life, and spent 20 years studying the Dharma, practicing rigorously, seeking enlightenment, only to find at the age of 29 that he seemed to not be getting closer, but in a sense, further away from his goal of awakening through his own self-efforts. And so he made a radical shift. He departed from that monastic life that he led. He sent out on a 100-day retreat at a place called Rokakudo, really seeking and reflecting upon his journey. He had a very powerful dream, and he awakened from that dream with a sense that he needed to seek out the guidance of a teacher he would have heard of by the name of Honen Shonin. And when he encountered Honen's community, it was a very different kind of place. The temple he was at during those first 20 years of his practice on Mount Hiei was a place where the monastic traditions were very strictly observed. And yet in this dream he had, he was guided by the Bodhisattva of compassion that said, if you should break your monastic vows, I will be your companion and guide you to the path of awakening. And so he must have woke up from that wondering, what path is there for monks who have broken their vows? And Honen Shonin was a teacher whose community embraced all, even monks who had broken their monastic vows and taken, married and gotten into relationships and so forth. So Xinran, then joining Honen's community, really found a home in the Nembutsu teaching, found a teaching that could provide liberation for all beings. Honen's teaching was distinctive because he said the true heart of the Buddha is the heart of compassion, wishing for all to live with peace of mind. This is the basic kind of perspective of the Pure Land Buddhist tradition. It's a perspective of compassion for all beings. The first concern being the liberation of all from the suffering and difficulties of life in this world. And so this teaching was very powerful, and it was all embracing men, women, people of all gender identities, people of all lifestyles who are equally embraced. Some had been living harmful lives. There were bandits and murderers in Honen Sangha, but he taught very clearly that the power of the Buddha's teachings, the power of Amida Buddha's primal vow, can transform that life of harm, that life of violence, into a life of peace and caring for others. And so there were people in Honen's community who had transformed their lives, whose lives had been transformed through this teaching, but at the same time, the world around them kind of still remembered what they had done. And they looked at Honen's community and they said, look at this place. All of these wicked people are gathered here, shoulder to shoulder with the people of the aristocratic family, the samurai, all of these people in one community. This is wrong. This is wrong. Society is meant to be divided up. Everyone needs to know their place. Honen's community, everyone sits together on the same level. It's unimaginable. This teaching is disruptive. It's dangerous. It is counter to the intention of the Buddhist teachings. And so there was a lot of lobbying of the emperor to suppress this teaching. And initially the emperor, because Honen had so many followers who were of the highest echelons of society, the emperor was reluctant to suppress the Nembutsu teaching until one occasion when the emperor had traveled off on a pilgrimage to the Kumano shrine. He was away for several days, and two of his closest consorts, very talented musicians named Suzumushi and Matsumushi, beautiful singers who he loved very much, they had gone on a journey walking through Kyoto and had happened upon a temple called Anrakuji, where the practice of chanting the Shoya the Raisan, the Ojo Raisan, these beautiful melodious chants composed by our teacher Shandao, this chanting was so beautiful and powerful that it moved people to seek and understand this teaching. So, of course, Suzumuchi and Matsumushi were musicians. They heard this teaching. They were moved by the music, but then they asked, what does it mean? What is the meaning of these words that you chant? And two of Honen's disciples, Judenbo and Anrakubo, they explained the heart of this teaching, which is to embrace all. Now, these were two women who had been, living kind of subservient to the emperor, and were now presented with this possibility of their own fulfillment and liberation, not living just to serve the emperor, but living to really fulfill their lives and to live of service to all beings. So they embraced this teaching. They entered Honen's monastic community. They became nuns. They shaved off their beautiful long hair, gave up their silk robes for the simple attire of a Buddhist monastic, and entering into Honen's community, they were kind of outside of the world of the emperor. So when he came back from his trip, he said, "Where are Suzumushi and Matsumushi? Please bring them here. I want to hear their beautiful singing voices." To which he was informed, "Oh, they've actually gone off and become nuns. They're never coming back." When the emperor heard this, he became so enraged that he said, "Okay, it's true what they've been saying about Honen's community. It's dangerous. It needs to be suppressed." And so the emperor issued an edict calling for the exile of Honen and his community. So Jurenbo and Anrakubo, the two monks who had performed the ordination for Suzumushi and Matsumushi for these two women, they were both stripped of their monastic credentials, their status, and were actually executed. And then Honen and his leading disciples, including Shinran, were sent into exile in all disparate areas of Japan. Honen was originally intended to go to Tosa, which is in now Kochi, like the bottom part of the island of Shikoku, so a completely separate island from Japan, very, very far away. Shinran Shonin was sent to Echigo, which is in Niigata, so kind of the other side, really the other side of Japan at that time. And so they were all being, his leading disciples, all being scattered throughout Japan. And at that time, Honen gathered his followers just before he departed for his exile. He said something really profound. He said, "I don't want you to be angry about this. I don't want you to hold hatred in your heart for the empire, for the emperor. And this is because the emperor has done us a great kindness." See, I've always wanted to go out into the countryside to share the Nembutsu teaching with the common people who are not able to come into the city. And yet, here in the capital, I've always been so busy. People are always coming to see me. I'm never able to travel outside the city. Now it is thanks to the emperor that I have this opportunity to carry the Nembutsu teaching into the countryside. And so for this reason, I feel deep gratitude to the emperor for this wonderful gift, this opportunity to share the Dharma. This is profound. This is the way of savoring life's experience from this perspective of the Nembutsu, where the most important priority is the liberation of all beings. Not my convenience, not my comfort, but rather, how can this experience of my life be an opportunity to share the joy of the Nembutsu teaching with others? So Honen Shonin inspired his followers to do the same, and as a result, this intention to suppress the Nembutsu teaching actually backfired spectacularly, because the Nembutsu teaching didn't disappear. Rather, it spread widely all over Japan as a result. From the area, the Hokuriku area where Shinran went, down to the southern area of Kyushu, where another of Honen's disciples named Bencho was sent. So all over Japan, this Nembutsu teaching spread. Shinran Shonin really took this to heart, and it is when he was sent into exile into this rural area of Echigo, along with his wife, Eshini, who was originally from that area. It's thanks to her and her family connections that they were able to actually stay alive, and not only to survive, but to thrive and to continue to share the Nembutsu teaching there. And that's where Shinran Shonin really came into his own as a Dharma teacher, savoring that opportunity to share the Nembutsu teaching. So a few years later, the exile was lifted. Honen was allowed to return to Kyoto, but he was already an elderly man when he was first sent into exile. And so when he returned to Kyoto, he didn't live much longer in this world and crossed over to the Pure Land before Shinran was able to return. And so we don't know why Shinran decided not to go back to Kyoto at that point, but most likely, with his teacher gone, and now coming into his own as a Dharma teacher, perhaps there was more for him in the community where he was. And not just where he was, but the people that he knew were now starting to travel, to immigrate into the area of the new capital. Because this was the time when the what's now Tokyo area was beginning to develop. At the time, it was just like a big swamp. But the new capital of the Kamakura capital was beginning to develop at that time in that Kanto region. Many of the farmers from the area where Shinran was living, this Echigo area, which is famous for its rice production, were traveling then to grow rice. They were immigrants moving into it. Really at that time, each province was its own country. So they were moving into a new country um, to practice agriculture, to bring their skills and to contribute to the development of this new capital. And we know that Shinran ultimately joined that movement of people and traveled then into that Kanto area, again, an area where the Nembutsu teaching had not been introduced yet. And when he arrived, there was already established Buddhist practice. There were already teachers there. Not in the same vein as the Nembutsu, but there were a thriving kind of Yamabushi movement, these mountain priests who would wear lots of big furry, like animal fur and long hair, and they would go up into the mountains and do very difficult practices, cold days like today outside, going under waterfalls, doing sort of superhuman tasks to demonstrate their tremendous spiritual power. And people would go to them seeking to receive the benefits of that spiritual power, asking them, my father is ill. Please use your spiritual powers to say a prayer and bring about his recovery. It hasn't rained in months. We need rain for our crops. Please use your spiritual powers to say a prayer and bring the rains. Sometimes it would work, sometimes it wouldn't, but people continued to have hope in the power of these individual spiritual practitioners. And so at that time, when Shinran arrived, he was a real kind of oddity, you can imagine. He appears and people say, "Oh, wow, I see you're dressed in the clothes of a Buddhist teacher. What are your superpowers? What are your special powers?" I say, "Oh, I don't have any special powers at all. I'm just an ordinary, unenlightened person, like all of you." And say, "Well, so what do you do? Like, what kind of priest are you?" He says, "Oh, I am just simply one who entrusts in the tremendous power of the Buddha." Like, "Oh, does the Buddha have the power to cure illness?" I say, "No, no, but the Buddha's teachings have the power to bring us peace of mind even when we're ill." "Does the Buddha have the power to bring the rains?" "No, but the Buddha's teachings give us the compassion to care for one another in these times of difficulty, when things aren't going as we need them to. For us to all survive on our own, we need to pull together, and the Buddha's teachings help us to appreciate that truth." And so more and more people realize that the power of awakening is there for all of us to receive directly from the Buddha. So fewer and fewer people were going up the mountains asking for these special prayers. More and more were gathering at Shinran Chonin's place. And as people gathered, then they stopped going, to the mountains. And one of these Yamabushi in particular, a man named Bennen, took notice. He said, "Where is everybody?" He said, "Oh, well, actually, these people, now they go to see someone called Shinran. They've stopped coming up the mountains." He says, "Shinran? Better have a word with this Shinran. Where is he? Where can I find him?" He said, "Well, he travels around a lot. There's a mountain called Itajiki Yama. He often walks around Mount Itajiki. There's a path he often takes." And Bennen said, "Show me this path." So Bennen waited there, and he waited in a very special way. He got his bow and his arrow, pulled it out, and he was waiting for Shinran. He waited all day, no Shinran. So in the evening, he went to his friends and he said, "You told me he goes on this path. Where was he?" He says, "Oh, actually today I heard he took the path around the other side of the mountain." And so Bennen the following day waited in the same way with his bow and arrow, waiting for Shinran. All day long, no Shinran. So finally, that evening, he says, what happened? He says, remember that place you were waiting the first day? Yeah, that's where he came today. And so Bennen said, fine, I'll go and see him myself. So Bennen goes to his front door. You can imagine him. Oi, Shinran, dete koi, come on out, Shinran. You imagine one of Shinran's companions opens the door. There's this Yamabushi, wild hair, animal skins, sword, bow and arrow, ready to fight, fearsome looking. Everybody runs, except Shinran, who just walks out very calmly and meets him face to face. And Bennen, we can imagine sort of, I'm here for you, Shinran. Are you ready to die? Are you ready to leave? And Shinran said, oh, I'm ready to depart anytime because I know Amida Buddha welcomes me into the Pure Land. I entrust all matters of birth and death to the Buddha. But how about you? What brings you here today? So then Bennen, seeing Shinran's peaceful countenance, this welcoming heart that savors that experience, that confrontation, not as here's a fight, but rather, oh, this is kind of spicy, but there's an opportunity here, somebody that I can know, a friend, perhaps, a new companion. And when Bennen saw this, he realized that this was a truly profound, his first encounter with someone who really lived deeply in the compassion of the Buddha. And so said that at that moment he threw down his weapons and he humbly asked Shinran, please make me your disciple. Now Shinran was famous for saying, I don't have even one disciple because I am not the teacher. The Buddha is our teacher and we are fellow students. But I welcome you to journey with me, to be my companion on this journey. And it said that Bennen became one of Shinran's closest companions. His name changed to Kyo Amida Butsu, to teach the truth of Amida Buddha. And in stories from later in Shinran's life, Bennen's often there as his companion journeying with him. And so as we reflect upon this moment in our lives, as we reflect upon and appreciate Shinran Shonin's life, I think that he offers us this precious teaching to think about how are we going to savor the experience moment to moment, even these difficult, challenging, bitter experiences can have an opportunity for nourishment through the practice of kindness and care for one another. So these are the appreciations I offer on this Hoonko occasion of teachings. In conclusion, I'd like to once again return to these words of Shinran Shonin and reflect upon their meaning together. Please join me in Gassho. There was a time for each of you when you knew nothing of Amida's vow and did not say the name of Amida Buddha. But now, guided by the compassionate means of Shakyamuni and Amida, you have begun to hear the vow. Formerly you were drunk with the wine of ignorance and had a liking only for the three poisons of greed, anger, and folly. But since you have begun to hear the Buddha's vow, you have gradually awakened from the drunkenness of ignorance, gradually rejected the three poisons, and come to prefer at all times the medicine of Amida Buddha. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Thank you very much.